freaking first cut. Golly. Welcome to the First Cut Podcast. I'm Rick Gehman, and this is your DFS preview for this week's Olympic Games. Oh, I only get to say that once every 4 years. Greg DuCharme is here to help me break it all down. Greg, it's good to see you.
It's good to see you too, Rick. Special event we have going on here. The Olympics, playing for hardware, playing for, really shiny objects. It's a cool little token for these players to add to their resume. And we got 60 players this week on a golf course that I think is really a strong major championship test. So I'm thrilled with the venue selection. And I think with all the Olympic coverage that we've seen so far, golf certainly belongs. So I'm excited about it.
What I like about the Olympics is that there are no ties, right? I mean, you don't get to, they don't dish out 7 bronze medals. No. They're going to a playoff to settle that medal, and only 3 guys are going to walk away with hardware.
Yeah, which is really cool. And look, this is not the biggest event in the game of golf. It is not. The Olympics is not to golf what the Olympics is to swimming, for example. But at the same time, it certainly belongs in the Olympics. It's such a global sport, and there are so many talented players from all over the world. It certainly belongs here, and it's something that these players can accomplish that they'll remember forever. So it's absolutely a cool event, and I'm excited to break down this field.
Yeah, and just to kind of jump into the format, you already alluded to it. I mean, for our purposes, for the DFS purposes, we're going to go through the DraftKings pricing. This is business as usual, right? It's a field of 60 golfers. They're scored in terms of birdies and bogeys and all that fun stuff. Their finishing position. The structure of the tournament itself, Greg, is 4 rounds, stroke play, no cut. So think about a signature event in that we have gotten, many of over the course of the last couple of years, which are usually in that 70 to 80 golfer range. And now just the field composition, instead of being all guys from the PGA Tour, they're broken down via country. So you're only allowed to have so many representatives from each country. The USA has 4 representatives. The max that any other country has is 2. That's based on the high ranking for the Americans. So you're going to quickly see how we get to, golfer 300 in the world, golfer 500 in the world, based on how the ranking systems have come together. And then finally, what you're going to see, Greg, is these guys play across all global tours, right? I mean, it's LIV, it is the PGA. You're going to see Korn Ferry, you're going to see the Asian Tour, you're going to see the Japanese Tour. You're going to see guys that are literally playing the global game.
Yes, and it's because they use the official World Golf Rankings to determine who gets onto the teams. And based on what country you're from, you may have a highly, highly competitive golf country like the United States, where it's really difficult to be a top 4 United States player. If you're a top 4 United States player, you're probably you're definitely a top 10 player in the world. And in most years, like this year, you're a top 5 player in the world, or top 6 player in the world. So it's very competitive in the US. There are other countries that don't have a ton of representation. And that's how you get down the list in the official World Golf Rankings with some players that you're not accustomed to hearing, but they still have the same opportunity as they stand on the tee. They're just 72 holes away from taking home one of those 3 medals, which are so rare. So I'm not sure that the official World Golf Rankings is the best way to determine Olympic teams. I'm not sure what the goal of it is, but I do think official World Golf Rankings are very good at determining who the best players are overall. So we have a very strong field, specifically at the top, and then we have some fun with some less familiar countries down towards the bottom of this field.
Yeah, and probably would not have been on the top of many people's lists to see Rory Sabatini and CT Pan grab medals in 2021. So there are certainly guys who are down the board who are quite live. In 2028, we're going to Riviera, but this year we are going to Le Golf National. Troy, if you want to share my screen, I can flip us through some of the imagery here, hole by hole. And Greg, you mentioned this is a major championship caliber venue. This hosted the 2018 Ryder Cup. It has been the host for the French Open on the DP World Tour routinely. I'll take us through some of the imagery. Why don't you give us some of the color commentary?
Yep. Basically, for my entire lifetime, it's hosted the Open de France. And as you can see here, there's a significant amount of water. You see it on the first 2 holes there. 10 total holes on this golf course do have water. It featured in 2018 in the Ryder Cup, which we all saw, some very thick and penal rough. I don't think it will be that penal if you're just off the fairway now. It is a graduated cut of rough, so that that first cut's not too significant, under 3 inches of rough. But after that, you get into some 4.5 inch rough. It's an interesting golf course the way it was built. It was really built kind of like a stadium venue that we're used to seeing here in the United States. So they moved a lot of land and a lot of soil in order to create these high ridges, which are natural viewing points for spectators. But the water, specifically, as you start getting into this stretch, which you're coming up to now, Rick, 15, 16, 17, 18, it has a lot of water. It has some bulkheads guarding the greens, kind of like you see at TPC Sawgrass. There are risk-reward shots, and some big numbers can be made. There, as you see, the 18th green is an island green that is guarded in the front and on all sides by water. It's much bigger than the island green at TPC Sawgrass, but it definitely creates a challenge. The tee shot on 18 is very challenging too. So in the past, in the French Open, we've seen scores right around that 10 under mark. The last 10, the average winning score is 10.7 under par. Depending on the way that it's set up, I think you might see scores get a little lower than that this week because they have had a lot of rain in Paris, and even this week they've had some rain. So I expect it to be pretty receptive, which for the best players in the world, that means they tend to go quite low.
I love it's not natural. You're right. There was just hundreds and hundreds of truckloads of dirt that they had to bring into this place every single day. So they're not these natural hills, but they look very natural. So I love that natural mounding, not only for difficult or different lies, but also from those viewing parts, it looks quite natural. And then the way that finishing stretch, 15, 16, 17, 18, basically water on all of them. 18 routinely plays as the most difficult hole at the French Open. This is a very cool way to end the championship. And Greg, I mean, it's one of these things where I think you're right. It could, depending on the setup, which, they could go a lot of ways with it. This could feel like a major championship.
It could. I think they're going to be a little softer with the rough. And I think the weather that they've had in Paris will prevent it from getting really firm and fast. But there will certainly be a lot of pressure. And the shots these players are facing under that pressure, even if it's soft and receptive, there's still plenty of big penalties lurking. So it'll keep you on your toes from start to finish on this golf course, because you can make some pretty big mistakes that could be really costly. So it's not necessarily a comfortable golf course. It's very tight off the tee. And as a result, players kind of stay away from driver quite often. This is a positional golf course, kind of like what we see in Florida, where you got to get the ball in play. And that allows you to attack these greens that are about 6,500 square feet. They're definitely on the larger side, but they are sectioned off with some smaller areas. So they may play a little smaller than that. But again, the biggest penalty is the water. And if you start getting into heavy rough, there's a lot of shots where you have to approach the green carrying water. And that just gets much more difficult coming out of some thick rough.
Yeah, I hope I'm hopeful, and I think it will look really cool on TV. I think this is going to be a lot of fun. Well, let's get into it, because it'll be a par 71, 7,100 yards, and we've got 60 golfers in the field for this week. We are going to start naming names, and they are familiar names. But first, we're going to take a quick break and hear a word from our partners.
We need your sports news anywhere.
We've got breaking news to bring you.
Then get your sports anytime you want them. Big trade news overnight to discuss.
Because we know you need sports all the time.
A lot of movement in the rankings this week.
A legend adds to their legacy.
We're bringing you that breaking news right here on HQ.
CBS Sports HQ, anywhere, anytime, all the time.
And we're back. All right, Greg, this is my website, rickrungood.com, and this is the cheat sheet. And what you'll notice is that there is a big $10,000 range, and there is not a $5,000 range. So the minimum price this week is $6,000, and the names that lead the way are the most familiar. Scotty Scheffler is $12,500. Xander Schauffele is $11,600. Rory McIlroy, off of his missed cut at the Open, is $11,100. John Rahm, off his win and Live Golf UK, is $10,700. Ludwig Oberg is $10,300, and Colin Morikawa is $10,200. We said this is a major championship caliber venue, and these are some major championship caliber golfers.
Yes, they are, which is really exciting. And it makes for a difficult choice up top because it's very unlikely that you're going to be able to get two of these guys into a lineup, especially if you go with Scotty Scheffler at the top, which is probably my favorite play. You know, he's had a couple of events with some struggles on the greens lately in his last three starts, but the other one was a win. You know, and one of them's a T7 at the Open Championship. His ball striking acumen is just incredible. And looking at this golf course, I believe something will be really important, which is accuracy off the tee, which Scotty Scheffler ranks out very highly in. But he's also first in distance from the edge of the fairway. So even when he misses fairways, he doesn't miss by much. I mean, he's first on tour. He is essentially, if you include his length in this, he's the straightest driver of the golf ball on tour. And that's really hard to ignore for a guy who's also the best iron player on tour. I think this is a great golf course for Scotty Scheffler. There aren't many that are bad golf courses for him, but his advantages this week could be elevated more so than we're used to seeing, to completely different levels. I think it's the same reason why he's had so much success at TPC Sawgrass, for example. Not that those are, great course comps. I'm not necessarily saying that, but stylistically, when you have the best iron player in the world, I mean, the best iron player in the world, you look at Xander Schauffele, who's been hitting the ball phenomenally well, and Scotty doubles him up in approach performance, right? In strokes gained approach, he doubles him up. Xander Schauffele. It's just incredible to me. And so I think he's going to be able to get the ball in play and take advantage of that iron play more so than anybody else. So, look, I love what Xander's done. If you want to go that way, I understand. He definitely has the edge when it comes to putting. But I think this is a ball striking test, and there's nowhere else to go for me other than Scotty.
I think there is a good precedent being set about how Scotty has won what feels like every signature event this year. And not only are those great fields, Greg, but you guarantee the best players in the world 4 rounds and they get to the top of the board. And that's what we have seen historically from Xander Schauffele over the years. We have seen him be the king or the prince of no-cut events where he just finds a way to the top of the board. And I want to focus on, we've got time. I want to focus on a couple other guys here. John Rahm has had a very quiet 2024, Greg, but it's starting to get a lot noisier. His last 4 starts are a T3 in Nashville, a T10 in Andalusia. Those are both live golf events. He had his best major championship performance at the Open, T7 there, and then he won last week at Live Golf UK. Are we starting to see the expectations that we have on John Rahm turn back into reality?
That's an interesting question with John Rahm. It's a very interesting question. What does a win on Live Golf mean? What do all the T3s and T5s and really solid finishing positions that he's shown throughout the year, what do they mean? It's a difficult thing to decipher. The T7 at the Open was great. It wasn't really in contention, but made a nice run on the front 9 on Sunday, which was helpful. So I think John Rahm's form is fine. I don't think it's up to the level of Scotty Scheffler or Xander Schauffele. And this is the hard thing about Rahm here. If I'm not going to pay up and get into the $11,000 or $12,000 range with Xander or Scotty, I'm much more apt to pay down to a Colin Morikawa or a Ludwig Oberg who I think could also be a great fit, but specifically Colin Morikawa. So that's the hard thing for Rahm with me. I think these performances have been great, but with the players he's surrounded with, I think there's a really strong likelihood that Colin Morikawa ends up on that podium.
It is a little bit of an awkward price. You can, if you make the decision to spend the $12,500 on Scottie Scheffler or the $11,600 on Xander Schauffele, those are two very viable options. And I agree with you that with the year that Colin Morikawa is having, probably a top 3 or 4, 2024, and definitely so since the Masters, despite not having a victory, he feels like a discount at 10,200, which leaves the meat of this range, Rory McIlroy, Jon Rahm, Ludwig Åberg, kind of stuck in an awkward position. And just to put a bow on Colin here, Greg, it has been a phenomenal run for him since April. He looks like the elite ball striker that we have gotten used to on the tour. His putter has been a weapon as opposed to something that holds him back, even when in weeks like the Open Championship where he did, struggle. He was just below average with the putter. He's still able to put together a T16 because of how strong the rest of his game is. I don't look much into past Olympic history. It's been 3 years in a different country, but he was in that playoff for the bronze medal. He was edged out by CT Pan along the way.
Yeah, and you think about the recipe that the Europeans used to defeat the Americans in the Ryder Cup. I think a player like Colin Morikawa was really sorely missed on the U.S. side. I know 2018 was a different time period, so he wasn't an option. But that style of player could have gone a long way because he does have the ability to pound fairways like many of those Europeans did back in 2018. So I think it's a great course fit for Colin Morikawa. And I am going to have at the top of this range, I do lean pretty heavily to Scottie Scheffler, as I said. But I will have a decision to make whether I'm going to go with Scottie Scheffler or Colin Morikawa. I think it's a really close call, especially when you consider the discount that you get for Colin Morikawa. I could definitely see a pivot off of Scottie. I'm kicking myself just saying that, but I could see a pivot off of Scottie to Colin, and I'd be quite comfortable with it.
Well, it will create some ramifications depending on who you choose at the top further down the board. So let's get into that 9K range. Shane Lowry leads it off, $9,800. Victor Hovland is $97. Tommy Fleetwood's in the middle at $95. And then we get Joaquin Niemann, Tom Kim, and Alex Noren rounding out just a 6-man range in the 9Ks, Greg. What do you see here?
This is a really strong range as well. And I think it is highlighted, and rightly so, by Shane Lowry, a very proud Irishman. He will be very excited to play this golf course and be an Olympian, which I really like. I love what Shane Lowry has done recently with his game. T19 at the U.S. Open, T9 at the Travelers, 6th at the Open Championship. These are good things. That putter that was so ice cold earlier in the year has really leveled out. And he's actually gained strokes putting in his last 3 events, 5 of his last 7 events. He's gained strokes putting. I think Shane Lowry is a very strong candidate this week.
When you look at the rest of this range, I want to point out one specific name. It's at the bottom here, Greg. It's Alex Noren. So he's coming off the T10 at the Scottish and the T13 at the Open Championship. But what I really want to look at is his history at Le Golf National. He is one of the handful of golfers in this field who have played a lot at the on the DP World Tour at the French Open. So he has played, I believe it's 23 rounds here. There we go. 23 rounds at the French Open. He won it in 2018. He's got a couple more top 10s. He was on that winning Ryder Cup squad in 2018 as well. What do you make of using 5-year-old history around Le Golf National?
Well, it depends. Generally, I wouldn't make a lot of it, but I do think on a golf course like this, it speaks to your style more than anything else, if that makes sense. Like, you look at Alex Noren from a general view. Is this a good golf course for him? Yes. So all it really does is just check a box. If he had all missed cuts here, I may say something different, right? I may be concerned, but the fact that he's won here is cool. Good memories, all that. The fact that he's played well here pretty consistently is a really good sign, but all it does is validate what we see with his recent performance, which is a T10 at the Scottish Open, T13 at the Open Championship, having a great year early in the year, T12 at the PGA, third at the Byron Nelson, all the top 20 finishes he had in a row leading into that, T9 at the Cognizant Classic, right? He is just having a really strong year. And he goes to a place that he's comfortable with, and he's on my list. I wrote 3 guys down that I'd be willing to play in the 9K range, and Alex Noren's definitely one of them.
So assuming Shane Lowry was a second one of them, who is the third on this list?
Yeah, Tom Kim for me, who I know missed the cut at the Open Championship. He missed the cut at the Rocket Mortgage as well. So he has 2 missed cuts in his last 3 starts. But Tom Kim is an extremely accurate driver of the ball and has shown a pretty strong ability to compete in big time events. I really like where his game is. I like his iron play. The putter has been pretty close to level, which I think is good. And I just think this is generally a great fit for Tom Kim. Now, you could argue and you could maybe convince me that Tommy Fleetwood is a better choice than Tom Kim. But I lean slightly to Tom Kim this week.
Plenty more options coming. We've got to get to the 8s, the 7s, the 6s. But first, we're going to take a quick break and hear a word from our partners. And we're back. Greg, we roll on the $8,000 range. Plenty of big household names. Corey Connors, Hideki Matsuyama, Matt Fitzpatrick, and Jason Day at the top. Sepp Straka and Minwoo Lee reside in the middle. Then the bottom of the range is Thomas Dietrich, Benny On, Wyndham Clark, and we round it out with a home game for the Frenchman, Matthew Pavone, at $8,000 even. All right. Now, this is where a lot of decisions, a lot of leverage, a lot of interesting things can happen, Greg. What are we looking for?
So I think my favorite play in the range, so I'm not going to go in order of price here. This just feels like a Sepp Straka special to me. The Austrian, Austrian, something like that, getting a start here. And he's been really, really solid with his ball striking. He tends to play difficult golf courses really well. I think when you look at some of these other metrics like distance from the edge of the fairway, you look at driving accuracy, Sepp Straka is second to only Colin Morikawa in this field. That's going to go a long way this week again. So, you're definitely noticing a trend. This is about guys who keep the ball in front of them, guys who are going to avoid the thick rough, and that's going to help them avoid the penalty areas. So I love Sepp Straka. Maybe you have a little TPC Southwind kind of feel here, right? Honda Classic. Golf courses with a lot of water, Sepp Straka has done very well on. So he's probably my top play in this range.
I like that. Those are. I was pretty lukewarm. I like Sepp Straka, and I understand what you were saying about the course fit. I agree with that, but that was a good little sales pitch, Greg. I'm warming there.
Yeah, I understand why you wouldn't be right there with me, because the results of late have been okay. They've cooled off since his back-to-back T5s at the Charles Schwab and the Memorial. But he missed the cut at the Scottish Open, but came back with a T22 at the Open. So I do think his game is still in really good form. He knows how to keep it simple. I like him this week. All the way up at the top, Corey Connors really needs a look. Now, I think Corey Connors is in a position at 8,900 where your build will kind of determine whether or not you can get him in. If you're going to go with Scotty, maybe you skip the 9K range and get a Corey Connors in there right after it. That's a very real possibility. But his ball striking has been Corey Connors-like for a long time. Extremely consistent. It still is. But what I really like about him is he's starting to get off the ice cold putter bandwagon. The short game has definitely made a big turnaround. And again, I think these kind of attributes make Corey Connors more than just a safe play, which he often is on golf courses like this. I think there's a very real chance that he actually gets himself up in contention.
I do think he's interesting because we are on the verge of him putting all of this together, it feels like. And we saw a glimpse of it at the Canadian Open where he had one of the best putting weeks of his career. And as much as I thought that was going to come back to earth, and it did immediately, but like you mentioned, 4 out of the last 6 he's gained strokes with the putter. The results are coming in. I don't usually talk about motivation because it's impossible, but this is a critical stretch for Corey Connors. He gets to go. He has Olympic Games, FedEx Cup playoffs, President's Cup at home. I can imagine if I were him, how focused I would be for the next couple of months here. And I know that cannot be quantified, but there are a lot of really good things trending in his direction.
Yeah, and they're prideful of the Canadian flag and should be. So I think he's going to look at this and all this stuff that's upcoming is really important. Like you said, he's not a lock for the President's Cup team, although I think he pretty much is. He's 8th in the standings. He's not going to make the team automatically unless he plays really well in this final stretch. I think he has the possibility to do that. I'll say one last thing, Rick. I actually didn't write his name down in my list, but I looked at it. I was thinking of something you told me before where I never really miss Corey Connors when I don't play him. I'm not really missing. I don't play him. I don't really miss out. But yeah. I'm right there with you that it feels like things are about to come together. And this could be just a spot for that. So I had to throw him in there.
Yeah, it is interesting. So Sepp Straka is right in the middle. Corey Connors is at the top of the range. I think it's worth spending just a second on Matthew Pavone here, Greg, just not only because he's the cheapest in the range, and that would get us to talk a little bit about the bottom of it, but also because this is a home game for him. But also I find him to just be the most fascinating, frustrating, exciting, but dull golfer in this entire field, right? It is so hard to figure out who he is. He literally started 2024 and was like a top 5 player in the world. Then he slumped for a couple of months and snaps right out of it at the US Open and has played a little bit better. Now, I mean, I just don't know what to do. Usually you'd give a nod to a guy that conceivably has plenty of practice in the region, maybe has been scouting Le Golf National, maybe has played it a ton, and also could just show up and win this thing.
Yeah, that's the gamble that you're playing with Matthew Pavone, right? It's like with which version shows up. And if you wake up on Thursday and he's up near the top of the leaderboard, you're thrilled, and there's a good likelihood that he hangs around. But it could go the other way just as easily. So the inconsistency is a little concerning to me. And I don't really like going on, well, he's at home, so he's going to gear up for it and play great. I do. On the other hand, I think there are still signs that his game is close enough, right? If not there. He probably feels pretty confident. But it's just a hard one. It's a hard one for me to navigate. So how much risk do I want to take at $8,000 flat? It's a really tough question. I mean, you go up just spend $200 more, you get someone like Ben On, who has been such a consistent driver of the golf ball for years, has been hitting the cover off the ball all season long, and seems to be a little up and down with the putter, but he's coming off a T13 at the Open. I'm a little more likely to lean that direction. Even $300 more. Thomas Dietrich, right? A player who has been inconsistent, just like Matthew Pavone, but has shown a real tendency to play well on difficult golf courses, which this could be one. So that's a gamble too. And I guess if you're going to come down to Dietrich or Pavone, they're both gambles. Which version are you going to get? Where I think Ben On is probably the safer option near the bottom of this range.
There's also a stark contrast between what Thomas Dietrich and Matthew Pavone have done at Les Golf National, all at the French Open. The difference, and both have played 14 career rounds there. The difference is over 2 strokes per round. Pavone is losing 0.66. Dietrich is gaining 1.56. This is the list of, this is actually sorted by most rounds played at Les Golf National. So you're seeing Alex Noren, who was in that 9K range. He's up here. And then other guys on this list we haven't gotten to yet because they're in lower ranges. But yeah, it's tempting to try Pavone, but I understand all the concerns and everything else that is around it. And even as we go down, I mean, this is probably a good segue into the 7K range, because the tiers that I'm creating are arbitrary. It's still a $100 difference between Pavone and Carlos Ortiz, who has been on a good run on Live Golf, or it's only a couple $100 difference down to Nikolai Højgaard here at 7,700. So those are 2 guys, Ortiz, Meronk, Højgaard, and Answer at the top of this range. Ryan Fox is in the middle, the bottom of it. Eric Van Rooyen, Matteo Montecero. So not a huge 7K range here, Greg, but there are some interesting options, and we're starting to blend guys that are residents or members of non-PGA tours.
Yes, and we're also starting to get to that point where you don't feel quite so warm and fuzzy playing these guys, but you're going to have to. You're going to have to find the ones that stand out. So who does stand out? I think when I look at this 7K range, I'm partial to Christian Bezuidenhout. This is really more of a long-term view. I really liked him for much of this season on the PGA Tour. I think he got a whole lot better as a player. Now, he is coming off a WD at the Scottish Open and a miscut at the Open Championship. Again, no warm and fuzzies, but a guy that has putted phenomenally well this season, improved his iron play dramatically, gets the ball in play off the tee. This is really more of a long-term view on him, and a course fit combination. So I like Seabez in this range. He's also played here just once and missed the cut. Also doesn't give you the warm and fuzzies, but I think he's an option. And then Rick, I only had one other guy, and that was, he may be my favorite play in this range, in the 7K range, and he's all the way at the bottom, Matteo Montecero.
Yes.
It's so cool that he got into this event. You're talking about 5 straight events gaining at least 2.9 strokes on approach. That includes the Scottish Open and the Open Championship, where he finished T31, T15 at the Scottish Open, T47 at the BMW International, T10 at the Italian Open, T7 at the KLM Open. He's done this all while losing strokes putting in every single one of those events. I think this is a player with a lot of confidence, who's playing very well, who could turn things around on the greens this week, and it could become very special.
I'm sure we spoke about him at both the Scottish Open and the Open, because he was $5,700 and $5,400 respectively, and he was putting together this stat profile. Nothing has changed. He has continued to flush it. He has continued to be great on the second shot and not so great with the putter. It hasn't really stopped him from putting together excellent results. You're not asking for a whole lot out of a $7,000 golfer in a 4-round event. Just go and make a bunch of birdies, see what your finishing position can end up being. And while he has a lot of history here, it's not great, but it dates back to like the last time he played the French Open was 2018.
Yeah.
So he played it 6 times from 2018 to 2012. I don't think that's huge in one way or another. Yeah, the only other one, the guy that popped up a lot for me as I was looking through this was Carlos Ortiz, just because he's been beating up on Liv quite a bit. So he won in Houston, then followed it up with a 9th place finish, a 14th and a 29th. It is hard to kind of put this into rectify it into value, but he won in Oman earlier this year. He's played a couple of Asian Tour events. I would not mind getting to Carlos Ortiz at 7,900, but it's going to be a bit dependent on what he does, or excuse me, what the projected ownership comes in at as we get closer for the rest of the week.
Yeah, I do think Carlos Ortiz makes sense. Abraham Answer is another name at 7,600 in this range, who's been, you look on rickrungood.com like you should, and it looks pretty good everywhere. But, it's one thing to finish T3 in a live golf event. You're up there, and it's a small field, and the guys that are playing really well, you're up there right there with them, kind of thing. When you start getting into the T18, T16 kind of finishes, those get even more difficult to quantify, right? So it's hard for me to put my finger on Abraham Answer and how his form is. The only time we've seen him really in a full field event, he played the Open Championship, T58, International Series Oman back in February, end of February, came in 38th. Everything else has been live golf. So those players, I wouldn't knock you for playing them. It's just really hard for me to quantify their general results. I would say Ortiz is it's likely that he's playing better than Abraham Answer right now.
It is interesting that Abraham Answer has, in the last year and a week, basically, has only played 2, I don't even want to call them full field events, 2 non-live sized events, which is either 48 or 54 golfers or whatever they're up to. I think they're up to 52, 54. I can't remember. But yes, only twice has he played in fields larger than that.
So it's just interesting. Makes it hard to predict.
Yeah, it does. The 69 down to $6,000 range starts with David Pugh, and then it has Steven Yeager, Emiliano Grillo at the top. Mito Pereira, $6,800. He was in that multi-way playoff for a bronze medal in 2021. CT Pan, our reigning bronze medalist, is in this range as well, 6,500, and it goes all the way down to Carl Yuan, Rafael Campos, amongst others, in the $6,000 range. Greg, these might be names that a lot of people have not heard of. They might play primarily on the Asian Tour or somewhere else that does not get nearly the level of exposure or metrics that we have for some of these other guys.
Yeah, this range is pretty difficult. And it's not just because of the lack of familiarity, but there's very few of these guys down here that are playing well right now. So remember, official World Golf Rankings is on a 2-year cycle, right? So this is based on your performance over a long period of time. And it's designed that way. We want to know who the best players are, not from last week. Right? The most recent you could have is, well, who's the best player right now? Well, the guy that just won. Every week world number 1 would change. So yeah, you go to an extreme, which probably isn't an extreme. An extreme might be 5 years, but you go to a 2-year deal and it moves a little bit slower. So these players, where sometimes we see in the 6K range, guys we're not really familiar with, but they're starting to show signs of playing really good golf. And I'm really interested in them. There's very few of them in this range. I think my favorite one is a player who plays primarily on the European Tour, and that's Shubhankar Sharma.
Yep. I already clicked his name because he was on my short list as well.
Yeah. You just see first of all, some good finishes. He was T5 at the Italian Open, T19 at the Open Championship, made the cut at the Scottish Open as well. He's been hitting the ball pretty nicely, at least with his irons. I mean, he gained 10 strokes approaching the green at the Scottish Open, and he seems to be putting pretty well also. So I think he could be a nice play, especially when you stack him up against his peers in this range.
Yeah, $6,500, and you mentioned it. And this profile, it's almost a straight line from approach play to putting, right? Those are his 2 skill sets. That in a no-cut event, great, right? There is no missed cut risk if one of those or both of those things go wrong. If he finishes T44, you probably didn't lose out on much. If both of those things start to work, and he finishes T5 like he did at the Italian Open, or T19 at the relative finish of a T19 at the Open Championship, you are in serious business with Sharma.
Yeah, and I think that's pretty cool, and that's why he's the first guy that I mentioned. He's probably the best play in this range, and beyond him, from everything I've seen, Rick, you're pretty much guessing at who's going to put together a good performance.
Yeah.
Which, look, some of these guys are going to jump up there, so it's just hard to find reasons. So, in that spirit, I got two other guys I'd like to take a guess on. One, because he's been one of our guys all year, Matty Schmid at 6,400. I think the price is right. He's shown some pretty strong ability off the tee lately. He did finish T12 at the 3M last week, and the putter's been okay as well. So I do think there's kind of some reason you could put behind this one as well.
Yep, he is one of the few, if not the only guy, who is going to make the trip from the 3M Open. I don't know off the top of my head, but
no, you got a couple like Grillo and Toasty.
Okay,
there's a couple more guys.
Yep. So T12 last week, the 3M Open, then straight to Paris. But yeah, international golfer, plays all over the world, and like you said, we've been following this guy all year long, and he does better than average enough that he is very, very live for this week. Okay, those were two of the four that I had that we have talked about.
All right. So the other one is a little more expensive at 6,800, and we just mentioned him because he did play in the 3M. That's Emiliano Grillo. This makes me uncomfortable because I don't think he's played very well, and I think he would admit that to you. But I think he's just really good. And what I'm seeing out of his ball striking is just kind of okay. But I think this kind of course fits his game, right? He's an accurate player off the tee. He's a great positional player. And while things aren't red hot right now, I think this is a dart throw at 6,800. But you're getting a little more potential, in my opinion, than like a Matty Schmid or a Shubhankar Sharma. But there's not as much evidence to support it.
T24 at the 3M Open for Grillo, and he's made like 7 of his last 8 cuts. He missed the cut at the Scottish Open, and that was it. And yeah, just talent alone, you think could go a long way in this field. I'll throw 2 more out there, and like Greg mentioned, these are darts. The Paraguayan Fabrizio Zanotti, who I thought when I read that name at first, I thought he was Italian. He is not. He is from Paraguay, and he has more rounds at Le Golf National than anybody else in this field. He's gaining like a stroke per round during that time frame. He normally resides on the European Tour, has played a couple of alternate field events on the PGA Tour this year, T37 at the ISCO, and he missed the cut at the Barracuda. And then I'm going with the power of the Norwegians. Victor Hovland's partner in crime this week will be Christopher Ventura, who plays on the Corn Ferry, and he's got like 8 top 25 finishes in his last 11 starts. He plays well. I think that the Norwegians are very tight. These guys both went to Oklahoma State. They're going to be good vibes, good times. I think they were roommates for a while too. It is going to be just a very good week for kind of both these guys to have things going in the right direction. And Ventura's playing great golf. He's only $6,200.
Yeah, he is finishing strong. I like it, Rick. Couple of Norwegian cowboys getting after it in Paris. How about that?
That's right. So those were the dart throws that I have. I was not brave enough to get to Gangajit Bular. I was not brave enough to get to Pachara Kwanatamai. I was not brave enough to get to some of these other guys. Greg, those were the names that I found.
Yeah, I understand it. I mean, I wish Carl Yuan was a guy we were all over early in the year.
Yeah,
it's just fizzled out. But I'd be rooting for him, but I don't really like the chances. So it's tough. The other guy, Rick, that was fascinating to me is Tapio Pulkkinen. He's from Finland, I believe.
I don't even think I have anything on him at all.
Well, he has played. He's in your database.
Yes. Okay.
But
Sorry.
he's only played one tournament in 2024 in February.
The magical Kenya Open. He finished T9.
Yeah. So I just wanted to point that out in case you're clicking through names, just looking at the colors, greens and reds. Make sure you check the date on that as well, because he hasn't played very much.
I'm assuming he is probably playing on like the Finnish Pro Tour or some tour that I'm not tracking. I'm hoping. But yes, he has. I have one tournament on him, and I have a headshot, which is shocking. So I have more than I thought I did on Tapio. It looks good.
Well, figure out how to get Finnish data, and we can make maybe we could make a more educated decision. But I just thought that was something interesting to watch for.
I'll work on that. That's very, very cool. Gosh, there was one other thing I was going to ask you, Greg, but I don't remember what it is. But this is going to be a fun one. We are going to there are no one and dones this week. There's no money on the line, so there's no one and done implications for this week. We will also, what I've been pitching in the group chat is that we each pick 3 golfers in this field. They have to all be from different countries, so you can't take 3 Americans. And then of the 6 of us, the best score to par get the medal emojis for
the next 4 years.
Right. Yeah. For the next 4 years.
That is just awesome. I'm glad everybody liked that. It's I think a really cool thing, and getting some hardware up on our name tags is fun. Well, I've had fun with it lately. Let's leave it at that.
Yeah, I'm still working on it. Okay, cool. So here's what we've got. We've got Tuesday's mega preview pod, which I will not be on, but the fort will be held down. That will be tomorrow on Tuesday. Wednesday, there is a network show, which is at 2 p.m. Eastern time, CBS Sports Network. Thursday is your regular round-by-round recap for round 1. Friday, the round recap will be on CBS Sports Network, so that'll be a longer show. It'll be live on CBS Sports Network. As soon as it's done, Josh will upload the audio and the video to the YouTube channel if you want to consume it that way. And then Saturday and Sunday are your standard post-round recaps on YouTube, and the pods get released. Did I miss anything?
I don't think so. Yeah, it's full slate. We're rocking and rolling every day, and we're getting ready for the Olympics. I can't wait to put a little hardware on the name for 4 years. That's going to be really fun to see. If I want a real gold medal, I would be so annoying, right? Like you just could not, like, I hold this for 4 years and you have nothing to say about it. Like, I will be so, remember when Justin Rose was just like pulling it out everywhere he went? Like, I would be that guy times 1,000. Kuchar had his bronze, like, always in his golf bag.
Yeah. Oh, you want to see that? I got it right here.
Yeah. Oh, I have it.
I would
use it as a ball marker.
Yeah, it's so good. It's so
Can you move that one to the right?
Like 10 more to the right now. All right, that is awesome. So we will be back. We'll see you again tomorrow. Big thanks to producer Troy doing all the hard work behind the scenes. Greg DuCharme is available at The Real GFD, and you can find me at Rick Run Good. This has been The First Cut. We'll catch you next time.